CBDC, the central bank digital currency or currencies. It's been a while since I last talked about that. I'm not going to go over every last detail I talked about last time. You can watch that previous video where I talked about some of the concerns that I had with a CBDC, not least of all the sort of control. But there's a lot of issues that I really saw with the CBDC. I outlined that in a previous video. But we've had some, this week really, over the last few days, we have seen, remember how I always talk about these waves of media? And what I noticed over the last week was my news feed was, which will be different to your news feeds, by the way, because I have mine all set up in a certain way, but they were just full of CBDC announcements and updates. And the one that's the most heavy over the last week was from the Bank of England. In fact, Friday, there were 6 or 7 articles that came out, and they were all different, all about the Bank of England, which is, it tells you that there's something going on there, something might be coming soon. So I just pulled one of those articles, which we'll talk about. We'll then go on to the CBDC tracker, so I can show you the different countries around the world, so you can see your country and where it's at. Then I want to give you a reference point of one major country, which was Nigeria, that launched theirs. And I've pulled together all of the issues from that and everything that you can learn from what happened. But then we're going to talk about a historical example, which is from the Soviet Union in 1947, and what happened when they changed onto a brand new payment system, even though it was still the ruble, as it were. But these are some really good examples that we're going to go through today. So let's begin then, quite simply, with the Bank of England and what they have said here. So they've said, and this is quite interesting because he was at a central bankers meeting in Washington, which was on Saturday. Actually, this meeting took place, and he said he's very reluctantly pressing on with the work to create this digital money. Remember, it's not digital money. There's 5 or 6 principles of money, and this doesn't meet a lot of those principles. So it's not digital money. It is a digital currency, which is very important. And he said that he's reluctantly pressing ahead because he's concerned about all of these commercial banks, and he's concerned about criminals, and he's concerned about fintech. He just doesn't think that they can handle it. And it reminded me of a book called Lords of Finance. If you've never read that book, I highly recommend it. It is a very high level read, though, I will add. It's a lot of economists read this book, a lot of students, university students who are doing economics read this book. And one point I want to bring from that is that the one thing I learned from that book was that you often think these central bankers are somehow geniuses and they know everything there is to know, but when the incidents took place with hyperinflation in Germany, and the Deutschmark and the Rentenmark, funny enough, I have one up there, an original one. You actually learn that some of these people really don't know what they're talking about, and they were bluffing. And you see this a lot throughout history. I know this probably sounds a bit crazy, but this is one of the things I've learned throughout studying history, is that when things go bad, people don't mind pointing the finger there and saying, this guy was a moron, this is all the things he did. But of course, when they're in the seat, no one wants to ruffle any feathers, and they say how great the person was. But that was one of the lessons I really got from that book, was really how mismanaged a lot of the central banks were. And we can get a good lesson from that. So when he says here, oh, I'm concerned about fintech and I'm concerned about, no, they're not the ones to be concerned about, because entrepreneurs, although they do favor profit over progress, they are the ones that drive things forward because they want to get a profit from driving it forward. The central banks really just want to hold on to that level of control. That is their focus. Quite ironically and amusingly, he said they're not going to make a decision before 2025. So that means, well, we're almost there right now, 2025. So I think they're going to make an announcement on that fairly soon. And again, soon in monetary terms is quite broad. It could be within 12 months. But he said, and this was quite interesting, because remember, I always listen for language. It's the linguistics, it's semantics, it's the study of all these things. I always listen for language, and I'm watching the body language and what they're saying or what they're not saying. Now, this was really interesting because he said that we're going to look at the go-ahead of a state-backed digital pound or another form of central bank digital currency. And it was the latter that, when I heard that, it made me sort of stop and question that, because one thing I didn't think of before is that some of these central banks could be doing a broader CBDC. That's a concept I didn't really think about. I thought about that with the BRICS, and that they have actually launched that. They just launched it recently. But with the BOE and some of the other banks, that could be quite an interesting curveball if they do launch a CBDC together. That would be dystopian. Let's just throw that out there. That would be dystopian for all of us if they did launch something. Maybe it would be under the IMF or what else could it be? It could be World Bank. It could be, there's a couple of them that could launch something. And I think that would be worrying. And I still think that we're going to see some sort of a black swan event. I don't know what it's going to be. It's probably going to be a cyber attack or something like that. Because again, if you look historically at how all of these new currencies launch, it's usually a major event. And it's only now that I look back on those other major events and say, was that really a major event, or did someone create it? I think I'll leave you to drop a comment on that. But I do think there's going to be some sort of major event on the currency system, on the financial system. Maybe it's a cyber attack, it's a massive hack, something like that. And we've seen this before, where on a Friday, the leader of the country comes on the TV or on the radio in the past, or something similar, and they make that an announcement. Oh, this major thing has happened, so we have to do this in response to it. I wonder if that's what will happen with the CBDC. He said that we're continuing to prepare for this or a CBDC because, to be frank, we're not yet seeing enough evidence that innovation will happen in the commercial banking system. Doesn't really give details on that. And he says that the banks make too much profit from the current system, so they probably wouldn't want to change. I think that's somewhat of an oxymoron in what he's saying. I think the banks, if you look at what they're doing, they are deliberately going towards digital. If you try and take cash in, it's a problem. If you try and withdraw cash, it's a problem. They don't like cash. They like the system as it is being very digital. They don't even want you coming into branch anymore if you've tried to go into branch because you need to sort something out. So I just don't really understand what he's saying there. So that was the first point I wanted to bring up. Now, actually, let's have a look at the CBDC tracker a moment, because this has changed massively. So we had the 3 launches: Bahamas, Jamaica, and Nigeria. Now, Nigeria is the key one I want to talk about, but I want to show you the massive change that's taken place now. This is pilot. So all of these countries now are in the pilot stage. Yes, there's Europe, there's Norway, there's Sweden. We have even Brazil in pilot stage. Russia's in their pilot, as is Kazakhstan. China here. We have India, all the BRICS countries, South Korea as well, Japan. All the BRICS countries are now in their pilot stage. Also Australia. There's been a lot of negativity coming out from Australia about theirs. If you're in Australia, you're probably not online right now because it's the middle of the night, but drop a comment, let me know. But you can see the pattern here. Look where most of the green is. Now, if we look at development, this was before very heavy globally. It was all under development. But we have seen this big movement, and it's shifted very quickly, just in 6 months. Here is the US, which they're having a lot of problems because this, well, it will take too long to explain the US. There's still a lot of problems and they've got the reserve currency system, so it isn't in their favor to push this too quickly. Canada as well. We have Mexico here, Colombia, Peru, and then we have Morocco and Tunisia and North Africa. But the UK Bank of England is very close. I think we're within 12 months of going into pilot stage, I would say. And I'll give you some sort of notes on that in a moment. Philippines as well. But you see how this has shifted. All of the development has now gone into pilot. So you can see how quickly this is taking place here. And then if you want to know any that actually cancelled, here we go. Here's your cancelled ones. That's Ecuador, if you want to run away somewhere, Senegal. And then we have the inactive ones as well. So these either trialed it and didn't like it, or they've decided not to go ahead. And then we have a couple within other. So that's really the update for you. A massive, massive change here. But the Bank of England is going to be pressing on, as we've just mentioned there. They've said that Bitcoin, as they're calling it, will not replace cash. That's what he's saying. But they've said this a lot of times in the past. Don't believe anything that they say. Although this one surprised me. This was the mayor of the City of London. He actually came out and slammed the CBDC. He doesn't back it at all. And just a reminder, the City of London is not the City of London, i.e. London as the city. This is a city. I should do a documentary on this at some point because it is crazy. This is a city within the city. Even, you know, I remember, I don't even think King Charles is allowed to enter there without permission. It's that crazy. BRICS payment system then. This has now launched. You can see October 22nd, so 6 days ago. And the BRICS Pay's proposed international payment system for members of the BRICS grouping. So this is going to sit outside of SWIFT and compete with SWIFT. And it will use already existing infrastructure. So that will be the MIR network in Russia, or India's UPI, Unified Payment Interface. And they're going to run this on blockchain. Now, what I thought was interesting, and I think you'll find this interesting, is they said this is, here it is. They said this is going to be decentralized. Very, very interesting. If that is the case, then I'm kind of impressed, but I don't believe it's going to happen, because all of the others that I've seen are centralized, and that's a problem. So if it really is decentralized and they are not going to do some of the things that I've heard, such as, you know, as we get currency creation now, printing money out of thin air, which is what they're trying to say if you read all the details. They kind of say they're not going to be printing money out of thin air. Well, not that it will, because it'll be digital anyway. But they're saying it's going to be a centralized system. It's going to be a decentralized system. And, you know, they're not going to have all these issues with inflation and other things. If that is true, then I'm going to read a lot more into that, because that could be a very good thing. Where we have issues is if you read all the other papers from all the Western governments, it's all centralized. They have complete control of the supply. They have control even of programmable nature, so how you can actually use that currency as well. So there's a huge amount of problems with all of this. There really is. I want to move on to talk about this historical example, but we could talk about this all day. Norway as well, they're going to be doing it by 2025. So this could happen any day. The Germans as well, any day. China has just launched as well a new type of payment, digital payment for tourists. This really does go on and on. So there's a lot that's happened just within the last week here. But I wanted to talk about the issues with the Nigerian currency that was launched. And then I want to give you the example, the historical example. So I summarized everything for you. Number one then, technical challenges and accessibility issues. And it talked a lot about the downtime of the system. The system was just down all the time in Nigeria. People couldn't use it. Frequent outages. access to the internet. So if you didn't have access to the internet, and you think about the UK, one thing I forgot to mention on that London walk around, which is kind of crucial actually, was I could not get phone internet reception. I mean, I'm paying for a top tier package, so I should be able to get internet anywhere. I just couldn't get it. And I'm trying to just do some simple things. Oh, I've got to look on Google Maps. I've got to find Google, even the Google Maps. Not that I like Google products, but it wouldn't even load up. Nothing's loading. I needed to send a Telegram message. It wouldn't work. You know, all these issues. And I don't I, I don't know if that's since Huawei was kicked out of the UK. It could be something to do with that, but drop a comment on it. How on earth, if you live in London, you deal with that? I don't know. Issues with device compatibility. There was loads of online scams and fraud. Limited awareness. Older people couldn't use it. Banking infrastructure gaps. Yeah, internet again. People that were unbanked just couldn't even use it. Huge trust issues with the government. And you remember what they did as well. Where's my notes from a few months ago? Yeah, do you remember that they changed the bank? They did two things. Number one, they outright, excuse me, where is my water bottle when I need it today? They outright banned cryptocurrencies just before they launched the CBDC, and they changed the banknotes beforehand. So the banknotes were no longer legal tender, but they didn't print enough new banknotes. So you couldn't really use your old banknotes, and you couldn't get the new banknotes. And then all these scams started taking place. They just, you can see what they did here. So sneaky. What was the last thing they did? Yeah, no, that really covers it. Let me give you the Soviet Union example then. This was their currency reform of 1947. So what actually happened? There was loads of black market activity, and there was also a huge amount of inflation, due to the oversupply of currency that they had. So what did they do? They introduced a new ruble currency, and this is where the sneaky thing came in. So this is something for you to be aware of. They allowed you, so there was no notice given, they allowed you to exchange your old banknotes for new banknotes, but at a very steep loss. So there's a huge loss on your cash. The rate was intentionally unfavorable, which allowed the state to wipe out large personal savings. So all these people that had lots of savings, it was pretty much wiped out because of this new rate. So it was a way the government was able to clear a lot of debt, and just, it was a wealth transfer, as it were, from the people back to the government. What was the immediate impact then? It was disastrous for ordinary citizens. You think people had endured a lot of problems for years and years and years. They'd saved up all this money. They didn't trust the banking system a lot of time. They saved up all this cash, or in the bank, either way, and then their savings were wiped out. A lot of people found themselves destitute, homeless. People couldn't afford food, and that's similar to what we talked about with the hyperinflation, in Germany, where, what was it, 2 billion marks bought a loaf of bread, if you remember that. What was the long-term consequences then? The government called this a necessary sacrifice. They always say this. And what happened? The people eventually just bypassed the official payment altogether. In fact, it was 200 billion marks in 1923 to buy a loaf of bread. So there's a lot of lessons for us all here with this CBDC, and what's coming down the line. There, you can see my OCD here. I'm trying to line up my pen. I can see it in the corner. Gosh. Ladies and gents, lots to be aware of. Plan accordingly, as always. But apart from that, I will see you on Wednesday now. Take care. God bless you and your family, and I'll see you on the next video.